Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Podcast. Our guest today is Rob Wright. Rob is a West Point graduate, a former special operations leader. Thank you for your service, Rob, and a tech founder who helps businesses turn AI. I know I gave a quick intro, but if you could give an introduction about yourself in your own words, a little bit about you and a little bit about the
Right. So,
work
like
that
you
you
said,
currently do, we
I grew
could
up in East
then get into
Tennessee,
the
and then I
topics.
went to West Point. I was a class of 2014. I spent the last decade in the military. Got out a couple of years ago. The entire time since even before high school, I've just been a serial entrepreneur. So I've always had a lot of interest in business, and throughout my time while I was in the military, I ran a few different businesses, but the main one was software development. And I kind of got a background in software development. My minor at West Point, if you will, was computer science. It was my engineering track, is what we call it there. So I've got a little bit of technical knowledge, but really good at working with developer teams because I can speak their language. And ultimately, I developed a couple products for myself and for some other clients. And then now with AI and the way that that's come about, it really empowers someone like me that's kind of a hybrid technical person. And I've got a co-founder team, and right now we're working on a product called Waffl. It's several different products, but that's what I'm working on right now in the AI space, specifically in software development and helping small businesses gain a competitive advantage.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm going to do a quick screen share here so people actually have a sense of how your homepage looks. Perfect. This is Go Waffle. We'll include the link to your LinkedIn profile and your company on the podcast so folks can definitely check that out. So thank you for that introduction. We have a few things we want to talk about. We've got a whole 1 hour, so there's plenty we can talk about. I'm super stoked in picking your brain here. Let me socialize the topic but I'm going to start at a different point. But here are some of the things we are hoping to talk about today. 3 topics in no particular order. AI adoption is easy, but creating advantage is not. What small businesses get wrong. Using AI to actually create leverage inside small and medium businesses. And last but not least, rethinking your stack, why websites and apps alone no longer create advantage. So there's quite a bit to unpack there. But I'm going to ask you something that's unrelated to all of those topics. You mentioned you're an entrepreneur. Let me ask you a little bit about entrepreneurship because you mentioned that. And it's actually, I think, a fair enough time to ask this question as more and more people are looking to get into this business of running a business. And I'll tell you why based on what I've learned. But can you tell us, why did you want to become an entrepreneur? Because, it's not the easiest thing to
I would
do,
say
right?
that
Maybe finding work
the
is not
funny
easy
answer
either,
is
but
I
probably a
never
lot
thought I
easier than
want to
running
be
a
an
business. So
entrepreneur.
why do you want to be an entrepreneur?
It's just one of those things that's how my mind works. So when I walk into, say, a restaurant, tropical smoothie cafe, my mind starts going, this is how many people are making the assembly line. This is how much they're getting paid. The rent is this much. This is how many orders they have to do if their average order price is this to break. I just think like that, and then I always like that challenge. So kind of one of my fatal flaws is almost as soon as you kind of get something figured out, I kind of get bored and I want to go solve another problem. And entrepreneurship, unfortunately, is a lot about persistence. So that's one thing that can be a challenge. But I never thought, oh, I want to start a business. I was just like, I'm going to do this because I think I can do it better than someone else. Or I think I can do this just in general. And I want to try because I'm passionate about it. And it's funny, a lot of entrepreneurs, our businesses end up revolved around what our hobbies are at the time or what we're really, really passionate about. It's just kind of something that naturally led into just based off personality.
I know, those are all great answers. And I say it because a lot of them resonate with me. And I promise you, I'm not making this up. I've said this in prior podcasts. When you are interested in food or a food business, you might look at every problem that's presented to you, whether it's food related or not, from the perspective of somebody who probably creates food or sells food. When you're a software engineer, in your heart, every problem that presents itself, even if it's agnostic to software, you're going to find a way to make it a software problem because that's the only way your mind thinks. So when you said that to me, I was like, you know what? I can totally see that, right? You walk into a place, you say tropical smoothie, You look at all the menu, you look at the way ordering happens, you're like, you know what? I wonder how their internal systems are. I wonder how dated it is, or how I can make some improvements so maybe the customer gets the smoothie quicker. Maybe they get that better than how they've gotten it. Or, many different ways to improve, whether it's back end, front end, whether it's B2B or B2C. So totally understand that. And you also mentioned persistence. I was going to say you don't say, because if there's one thing you need, it's a lot of that, correct? Because it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to test your metal on a daily basis to the point that you almost want to give up on it. And then you wake up the next morning and sure you don't want to give up and you keep chugging
when I talk about
So
entrepreneurship, I would
perfectly
say,
lovely
if I had
answers.
started back in
So
high
let's-
school and
Sorry,
somehow,
go
of
ahead.
course, in entrepreneurship, you're working at odd hours of the days. It's not like a W-2 style job. But if I could take all those hours and just go back and get minimum wage, I'd be way better off than I am right now financially. But you miss out on all of the education that you get along the way. And then as I've matured and as I've grown and gotten older, and new opportunities, new connections, networking have presented themselves, more investment, more fruitful business, more fruitful relationships. So, a lot of times they will say, I think, what is it, Christian, maybe like 7 times, you have to fail 7 times. And not every business, just because it doesn't make $1 million or get acquired, does not mean it's a failure. If you can not lose money, to me, that's at least at a minimum a learning experience, and you understand those challenges and you take that forward to your next thing. So when you go, if you're deciding to be an entrepreneur and you go and do one thing, don't think that if that doesn't make you X amount of money or do something that you're unsuccessful. And I'm kind of the epitome of that. I've had a lot of things that have been kind of so-so, but and eventually what you decide is, am I going to lean all the way into this after a certain amount of time, or am I going to pivot to my next thing and set a way to walk away from this entrepreneurship opportunity that I've been doing for the last couple of years?
If this were a live podcast, I would have gotten up and given you a tight hug. I'm telling you, I'm not even kidding, right? Because a lot of what you say can only be said by somebody, and sometimes even appreciated by somebody who's lived through a lot of those pain points, right? You know what I mean? It's just the nature of the beast. There's never a morning goes by where I think to myself, maybe I should just take a vacation and pick up a job, because when you're running a business for many years, even picking up a regular job feels like a vacation, because somebody's going to task you and you get your paycheck on the 15th and the 30th of the month, and you feel like you're good to go. Not something you always enjoy when you're running a business, but there are things that keep a lot of us going.
It's not the destination. A lot of it's the fun of the journey.
Inexplicable reasons,
so
right?
I think maybe next time, my next business just might be a consultant. I like coming in and fixing problems and using kind of that 15 to 20 years of entrepreneurial knowledge that I have to be like, okay, this is what we can do to fix the problem. But that's not what we're here to talk about.
No, it's not. But I think it's just as good a topic, so we can certainly spend a bit of time on it. But let's get to some of the things we had jotted down that we were going to actually have a conversation about as well. So let me pick one at random here of the 3 topics. I'm just going to go with actually the first one, not because it's the first one, it's because I actually want to start there quite intentionally. AI adoption is easy, creating advantage is not, and what small businesses get wrong. Let's actually dissect this. I want to dig deeper. I want to take every word and dig almost a combination of words and dig deeper. So let's break the topic down into multiple pieces, if you will. Let's start with AI adoption is easy. I'm not even going to go to the second part of that.
I will caveat that
topic
with an asterisk and say
I just want to
it's
understand
easy depending on your size. If you're a solopreneur, it's very easy because you can just log into ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, and you can get efficiencies out of it. So, before you would have to go to, say, I think it's Canvas. You have to create your own graphics. You'll have to resize those. You'll have to go to one of the distribution tools or directly to all your social media accounts, and then you'll have to publish those on the schedule that you want or set up a schedule. And that takes a lot of bandwidth. And that's why you see a lot of small businesses, they stink at social media, frankly. And I've been one of them too. Now there are tools that exist out there where you can kind of have an agent, if you're willing to pay the cost, kind of do a lot of that for you, or at least set up human in the loop iterations, and you can do that. And a lot of the builders that are building AI, these productivity tools, because that kind of gets to the latter half of the statement, they're easy to use. It's conversational human language. That's how they've set them up. And you get a huge power punch by being able to do that. Now, if you're a real nerd like us, you can use some of the tools that are a little bit more scary to look at because you're seeing, code and syntax and things like that. Yeah, I think it's easy because they're building it right into some of the systems that you currently already use. But there's definitely a word of caution there. Everyone's what I call bolting on AI bolt on. That doesn't mean it's good. That means they want to charge you another higher subscription tier.
No, fair enough. See, we are in the business of building software, and I think both of us are going to agree on a number of things. I'm 100% certain, but I'm going to find intentional disagreements just to sort of humor ourselves and to hear both sides of the story, right? So when I'm saying no, it's honestly not because it's a no. More likely it's going to be a yes. Just knowing you in the last 5 minutes, I feel like we might agree on more things than disagree. But I'm going to pick on some of these things just so we get the totality of what we're talking about here. Let's still stick to the first part of the statement. AI adoption is easy. Let's take a regular size. I'm not talking large companies or really. Let's take companies such as ours. Assuming smaller companies that are growing companies. Adoption is easy. Yes, because you don't have the bureaucracies of a large organization. You don't have all the approvals and the chains of approvals that you probably have to go through. But is it truly easy? And here is why I'm asking that question again. I'm going to give you an example. We do a few different things at Snowpal Raw, but one of the things we've been focusing on is building APIs and publishing them on AWS Marketplace and some other places. So people can build software in quicker time and not have to do the whole 9 yards. That's just the gist of it. No matter what we do, the way we socialize requirements, even amongst ourselves, within ourselves and amongst ourselves in the team, has not always been a traditional write like 10-page documents ever. It's a lot of times you're walking, maybe I'm walking on the trail, you capture your thoughts into these voice memos. We stick them on Slack. It's going to create the transcript. And we socialize that with the team and figure out, okay, does that make sense? How do we go about it? We take that and create these issues on GitHub to document what are some of those initial things we want to be able to do. Simple enough process. So the time spent in thinking is not spent in front of the machine. It's spent when you're doing other things, and then you come to the machine to start acting upon those things. Now, with a lot of these AI tools in place, I try to do this intentionally differently, and I want to socialize that with you and get your thoughts on the easy part. I was thinking about, Chris, you're going to have to do this differently. There's a lot of tools available. Let's do it the best way possible. So I tried to not do it the way I explained it to you just now. And I said, you know what? I'm going to probably create a voice memo using one of these tools, maybe ChatGPT, maybe Claude, whatnot, and have that generate the requirements document for me. Typically for an API that we build, we might have like 20 different voice memos in totality, but I just took one of them, used one of these tools. It did a good job, but it came up with like a 15-page Google Doc that captured all of this. I was like, oh my goodness, it's 15 pages for like one voice memo. If I do like 20 of them, how many pages is this even going to be? So I still continued with that for a couple of voice memos. At one point, I was like, Rob, you know what? Using a lot of these tools is actually making me less efficient here. Maybe I should just stick to how we did some of these things in the past and not force fit the tools available today, because maybe we were productive even otherwise, and we were trying to coerce these tools into our systems and processes in the interest of doing things differently and becoming more productive. And we lost sight of the forest for the tree in this case. Now, this is not a manufactured example.
It makes so much sense.
And this may not even be the best example. But if
there's so many things I want to talk about with this.
Sense, I just want to get your thoughts. I'll start kind of
work backwards because it's fresher. But the force fitting of tools, that's a huge one. And if you're on LinkedIn, and most of the listeners I'm assuming are, there is a FOMO, a real FOMO that's created because every person who wants followers, likes, and ultimately wants to fill their pipeline with sales is dropping these posts and then promoting them that says such and such is dead. Or, we even do it. This and this is cooked. You've got to use this. Or this company just dropped this tool and it replaces 50, 100 people in your organization. And you're like, oh my gosh, I got to try that out. How can I use that? If I can't use that, then obviously I'm going to get left behind. There's a real FOMO out there about all of these tools. And so you hit the nail on the head with your example. I love that example because what we actually talked about a couple of months ago for our internal team meeting is the way we're trying to pitch and talk to our potential customers is, where do you need, and this is where we come in and look at their business, where do you need AI? Because if it is not replacing something that you do or generating something that you already don't do, it's not giving you a competitive advantage. What it's doing is just making some process potentially more efficient. And you're the key example where you thought it was going to be more efficient, but it wasn't. So it was a force fit of a tool that you didn't need. So I thought that was really interesting, and it goes with really what we talk about on Waffl for our custom dev clients, the ones that we work human direct connections, and we're really trying to isolate portions of their business, and in some cases, several processes of their business, and put AI in there in a way that makes sense. The other thing I wanted to touch on was how you brought this in, human in the loop. I think it's more important than most people realize. And your example, now you can dial in an engine off of a large language model to maybe produce a better result for your example and make it a little easier. But there's something that will honestly, not never, but it will be very difficult to replace some of the intuition and the understanding that a human has in building software. And that's something that your small example demonstrated there, and something that a lot of people need to understand. The crazy thing about all the software that's come out is you can build a website, you can build all these different things in hours, seconds, minutes, depending on what you're building. But the problem is it's allowing people to build things faster than really their organization or their company's ready for, and they're not putting in thorough thought. And I love that's why you said you really want to evaluate. You're outbuilding your ability to integrate these tools. And that's a lot of what we do. We've picked up the pieces for a lot of custom development clients, bigger than small businesses, larger businesses, where they're like, yeah, we tried to do this with this guy, and then we brought this guy from down the hall. And, it's just like everybody thinks that they can deliver all these results. And really, it's like, does the market want that? Is that what your business needs? Like, you don't whiteboard anything anymore. You just build. And then you build this thing with inherent issues without an unvalidated need. And I think that's the risk, not only for entrepreneurs, but businesses as well.
Yeah, I think very well said there, right? So which means let's now talk about the second part of it, right? Which is AI adoption is easy depending on how you do it. And we talked about a number of pros and cons there. Let's talk about creating advantage not being easy and what small businesses get wrong. Can you tell us what some of the things that small businesses get wrong? And if you could also supplement that, Rob, if you will, with why small businesses specifically? Why is it not just what businesses get wrong and just small businesses get wrong? So what are some things that the big businesses are doing differently that they are not getting
it there? The force fit is kind of one of the things. The reason I think larger businesses aren't getting it as wrong is because whether they stood up a new department or tasked part of some of the existing departments, identified new people on the headcount, they're responsible for ushering in certain AI, and they have KPIs that they're going to report to their bosses on and and they're really going to evaluate this because they're talking about large dollars at stake, and they have that bureaucracy process. So for them, AI adoption isn't as easy. It's slower, but they're going to get it right more because they have the processes. Like for the military, for example, the most bureaucratic thing that, I've been a part of. It's going to be, they're trying to integrate it, but until it goes, wide scale all the way down to the, smallest user, it's going to take a long time for that. But they will know that the need is validated there. And so unfortunately, they get into it takes so long that it's actually already outdated by the time it's implemented, but that's a whole nother discussion. So I think that's why bigger businesses get it right, because they put people in positions that are accountable for results. Small businesses, whether it's one employee, 10 employees, 25 employees, they're not dedicating anybody to this. Really, they're leaving it up to the heads of departments or just the person that wears 15 different hats. And it's like, they're not actually getting approved. They're like, hey, can I use the credit card to kind of like charge this thing? It's kind of helping me. But is it really, or is it just adding chaos to like an already complex system?
You mentioned small businesses. Let's talk about a small business. Let's talk about Meta. You may have heard of them. No, just kidding. Let's talk about a big business. Let's talk about a huge business, right? So we know a lot of these hyperscalers are spending hundreds of billions of dollars on capex, right? I mean, it's the money's flowing literally. As to how the stock market is reacting to it, we'll probably get to it, but not just as yet. So let's take Meta as a company, founder run company, right, for many years. I mean, we all like them for a number of reasons, maybe have opinions about some of the things they do, but regardless, they're a phenomenal software company. Now, I think, if I'm not wrong, Rob, I think Mark Zuckerberg had said recently that they're probably dropping the ball on the Reality Labs division, which is like the pet division that they've had. They've spent $80 billion over the years. We all know where Metaverse went. Looks like they have decided probably not going to spend more money or not as much or something along those lines. So the thing I want to ask you here is, we're talking about big businesses. I mean, these are the biggest of businesses, the hyperscalers. They have no dearth of dollars. They have plenty of money. They're building data centers left, right, and center. I don't live too far from a number of them in Northern Virginia myself. But they get it wrong too. I mean, they've gotten $80 billion wrong. Apple spent a lot of time in building Apple cars, and they have this Vision Pro, which you put on the head, it's like a brick. I don't think it's going too far, in my opinion. So these large companies
I think
also get
that's
it
part
wrong.
of
I mean,
it. The other thing
is the only
that
difference
when you
that
look at
they have the luxury
capex
of getting
and
it
the
wrong, and
evaluation
some
of
of us don't?
projects at the large scale level, they're going to use internal rate of return, cost benefit analysis. There's a couple different more where big businesses and people's jobs depend on it, to where they really look at it economically as a sunk cost. And if you haven't ever heard that term, and you're a listener, go look it up. What it means is you cannot evaluate future decisions based off something you've already invested in. It doesn't count. It's zero. So you only can look at it going forward. So as soon as a big business realizes, hey, our CapEx is $100 million and we're spending 25 on this, but we don't see the return anymore, and now this new lucrative project is there, they will not look, oh, we wasted $100 million. Because the most thing to answer for their shareholders is what looking forward is the best rate of return. So they're able to do that. Now, they hand out a few golden parachutes when they do that sometimes, fire somebody, send them off with their executive bonus. But I think they have the ability to absorb it. And then they actually are really evaluating these projects. And it's so easy to just cap somebody off of the head count and then just bring in somebody new when they realize that project is no longer in the best interest of their deployable shareholder capital. So I think both, exactly what you said, and that they are accountable to it. And when we as small businesses, we kind of get our heads down, we're like, I'm a failure if I don't make this work, rather than moving on to the next thing. So kind of that life coaching we were talking about before.
Actually, it's what you say there is incredibly important and interesting. I want to dig a little bit deeper. As a business, as a founder, as a founding engineer, let me take an example. You invest a lot of your time, your energy, make a lot of sacrifices. You mentioned the sunk cost. If I had worked for a large company, or if I had a W-2 job, how much money could I have made in the window of time that I chose not to do it? So a lot of these things play a role. And then you're married to your ideas as well, because it's your baby. You spend a lot of time and you can't let it go, right? I mean, it sometimes takes a long time to find product market fit. Like Seinfeld, as a show, it took them 18 months or 24 months to find product market fit. But they had the luxury of being in a time and age in networking, in the world of media, even though it's unrelated to a core conversation. I think it's a fair enough example that they could spend 2 years and then make a mark, and then we know how popular, right? One of the most popular shows in the history of TV shows in the US. But not everybody gets that luxury. I don't think a show can go to TV today and not make an impact for 18 months. And if you extrapolate that to software engineering, You don't get those many opportunities. And especially in the world of AI, Rob, as we both know, more and more people are able to build software without a technical background. So your competition, I mean, there wasn't always a great higher barrier to entry when you talk software engineering, but now it's, I think, become lower and lower because don't have to you don't have to go to college, you don't have to get a diploma, you don't have to have any experience, and you can use these vibe coding tools and then end up building software. Given all of these challenges, how do we go about, what are some things you have to do differently when it comes to building software? How do you let go of these ideas that are probably not working
Yeah,
out?
that's a
At which
great
point do you say,
question.
you know what, I've
We
spent enough
actually,
time and money on it.
in a success
I'm not
story,
finding the return, so
that's
I'm just
kind of
going to
how
move on to
Waffl came
something different.
about. So we got together with three guys. We built a piece of software where we were originally starting out something in the ed tech space. And the market response was, wow, this is a great product. It does an awesome thing. But do you know how many people were writing checks for the product? Not many. And if you're going to sell to schools, primary and secondary education, it's very challenging. I kind of knew that because I've sold to schools before, but the team was already kind of going forward with the project, so we went on that. And ultimately, we did a slight pivot, tried to go after homeschool market, which is still a very skeptical group, and rightly so, very protective of their education and slow to adopt things. So what we found through that process was there's still a lot of people that need software built. And what are we good at? Well, we're good at building software. So we went where the money was. And the money was continuing to solve problems for other people. And it has not been a problem to get clients. And that's kind of how you know you've got the right client fit, the right product offering. Now, I think there's the old adage of if you build it, they will come. And that is actually just really not true. So however you get your product out there, you've got to have the product that you want to build, validate it, which we did. We had tons of good feedback. But then when we went to actually close after the product was built, because it's really hard to get pre-commitments and things like that for something that doesn't exist. So you validate the product, build the product, and then go try to sell the product. And what you've really got to have is kind of that distribution plan. So whether that's actual in-person sales, whether you're going to allocate a marketing budget to it, whether you're got a popular following online that you can use or you're going to pay other people, you've got to spend some money or time equity and see if the demand is there. And if people aren't paying for it, you've got to kind of set that time and figure out how long do you keep doing it? Because persistence isn't always going to be your solution. But I'm not telling you to pivot early, but sometimes the market just has to validate what you're doing. Because once it's not hard to sell, once you're offering a solution and not trying to sell something to someone, it really becomes easier. So yeah, I guess that's the answer to that question. I'm not sure if I hit it all.
No, you did actually, but let's get a little bit deeper to it because it's very important what you mentioned there. It's one thing to be able to build something. It's another to be able to get somebody to pay for something that you did build. Right? People are going to like something, but that does not necessarily mean, it actually does not mean that they're going to pay for it because there's a sense of entitlement, if you feel, when it comes to software specifically, because when you talk to people, a lot of what they're using is they're not paying for it. And it almost feels like these companies are doing them, it's for not for profit because, you're not paying to be on Facebook or Instagram or on Google Sheets or Doc. It's because those companies, the same companies, make a ton of money on the B2B space. When you go to advertise on those platforms, you know how much money you have to spend as a small business to advertise on those platforms. But the end user isn't paying any money for a lot of those tools. So when you end up building a tool that's slightly better, they probably won't want to pay for it because they could still get a lot of it done using the freeware that's available there. So given that, Rob, how do you look for this sweet medium? How do you build something? You have a passion, you have an interest, like you said at the top of this conversation, and you have the ability to build something. But how do you make sure that all of those align, that you actually have the passion, have the persistence,
Chris, if I
and
had
the
the
skill to
answer to
build
that
something,
fully,
but it may take a
I
while
would be on a beach somewhere.
for you to get paid?
Because I have built so many things that were great products that it was really hard to get people to pay for. So
Totally.
kind of broad guidance would be as much as you can validate the need. And what is great is there are those vibe coding tools to where someone that's decently savvy is going to be able to come in and you can put together your MVP now without spending $20,000 to $30,000. Now that's the great thing. And then you can see if you can get people to sign up. That's your first thing. Don't even worry about the paid tier. Get the free tier with the free features and then see if you can get people to sign up. Because if you can't get people to sign up for that, you already know, right? So one of the funny stories about Waffl was when we were deciding to make this pivot, I was literally making a pitch to someone in person, talking to them about what we could build. And one of their pain points was, well, when we were doing it with someone off, I think they hired them off Upwork. When we were doing something with someone off Upwork, it was hard to communicate what you want. And we had already talked about this. We were thinking that this was going to be something we were going to build. Kind of similar to what you said, we actually built what we call the concepts engine. And you can type or talk to it, and it will generate a PRD for us to build off of. And we've refined it to where it's pretty good, but you definitely still have to have those meetings. You can't just take that and run. There's still a lot of context that's lacking. But I explained that that's what we did to the guy, and he was like, that sounds amazing. Can you come pitch me in person with my, CEO? And I went to that. We still didn't have it built. And we sold them and got a deposit 2 days later, and then we went and built it because we didn't have it. Now we have the ability to do it, but we sold something before we even had it. And that's a common story among a lot of successful businesses. So I'm hoping we follow that trend. But selling stuff or being able to validate the market need before you actually have the product or are so invested in it, because especially with software, you're going to find that software as a service is extremely challenging. 95% of companies fail. It's part of the reason why I've moved to, instead of software as a service, I'm building software as a service. And what we will talk about, I think, a little bit later is what we did finally cave in, and we do offer a Waffl software product, but it is anti-software. It is something to let the user use as they want it. It's another AI tool. But yeah, that's what I would say. See if you can validate the need before. If I could do that, it would save myself a lot of time.
I think it's very important. Because, a lot of times we are caught up with what we are genuinely interested in. And as a developer, you want to build it. You want to see that happen. You're more worried about the bugs, the interaction, the interface, and then the whole 9 yards. But then you sort of conveniently, even if inadvertently so, forget that you're making this to solve a problem. Sometimes, you forget the problem that you're solving. And what you're trying to do is just trying to build it because you want to solve that problem. So I think a lot of what you said there makes sense. Let me ask you, when you gave this example earlier, did you have like a working version that you had built, like a prototype?
What we were able to show
and you showcased it
was
to
the
your potential
product
client
that
when
we
they wrote you the check, or was it
So
an
we were
idea
able
that
to
was
show them our
showcased
EdTech
in some
product,
other form?
which one of the things that product did is it took a large data set. For example, you could upload like the Tennessee State standards for 7th grade biology, and it would build an entire course. So it would ingest all that information, compartmentalize it, and then build quizzes, tests. So I did that live in front of them, and fortunately their business had a need for large documents to get ingested and processed in a certain way. So they're like, well, if you can do that, you can do that. And I'm like, yeah, and we got this dashboard, and it's going to be all great, and you can log in and see all the progress, and you'll be able to talk, so some of it was like we didn't have yet. But yeah, so that was kind of one of the ways that we handled that.
Very interesting. And how much of that would you attribute to the ability to sell and make a convincing argument to somebody versus the engineering side of things? And I ask this to give you context as somebody who's pretty much been building software all my career, Rob. But when I launched this company years ago, little did I recognize the fact that building would continue to be challenging, right? Engineering as software is not the easiest thing to do, even with AI. It's still, there's got its levels and layers of complexity, but we never appreciated the challenges outside of engineering as much as when we started doing it. We were like, then you know what? Yep, we run into technical issues, but we back ourselves to solving those. But everything else that's not technical, we clearly don't seem to have the skills to do plenty of these things. So that being the context,
I would say that.
Well, how much of what you were able to accomplish?
Have engineering. So we had a product that worked in the
side
demo.
Of Rob versus the engineering side of Rob.
At least in this context, for what we were selling, it 100, not even, I'm not the best salesman, but what it had to do with was trust. So, because I was there in person, right? And you can do this over Zoom, but your ability to make if you're doing high ticket clients where they're going to invest a lot of time with you, at least, your ability to make them feel like you have the skills and the team and the knowledge to deliver what they want, make them believe that it's possible to do what they want to do. That's what got us together with them. So it was definitely more of the relational side and the trust building than anything, because you can build the best product in the world. It's not going to get people to necessarily use it.
Going back to what you just said there, the importance of being able to establish trust is key to, closing that deal, so to speak. Now, when you talk about the world we live in currently, Rob, where you don't have to have gone to college, studied computer science, or written any code, because I talked to a number of founders on the podcast here who are very different from me by virtue of the experience that they brought to the table before they launched their companies. I've talked to a number of them that have never written code. I've never even seen code for that matter. They didn't even hire software engineers. They hired people who kind of were software engineers, but not exactly so, not developers. And they were able to not just go to prototype or POC, but they were able to go live and start onboarding customers onto those platforms, right? That something was unfathomable 2 years earlier or 3 years ago, which is happening today, which means a few things. You're going to have a proliferation of products out there. Not all of them are going to stand the test of time. I don't expect them to, but there's a fair number of them that hopefully stand the test of time. But what that also means, Rob, is being able to build something is becoming less of a skill these days, meaning, hey, Krish can build software. Let's go with him is not the answer anymore, because a lot of people can. You can use Lovable, you can use a lot of these tools, Claude and Codex and whatnot, to be able to have that generate not some, but pretty much all the code that you probably want to run your system. So what then becomes the differentiating factor? Is coding even going to be relevant and important? I mean, do you see a world where a developer and the quality of code that the developer can write is
I don't
even
write
important?
Code. Now, again, my
what is your
minor
take
was in
on
computer
this?
science. So, we're doing Python commands, and I'm looking and creating databases and foreign keys, and I understand enough to, when a client is describing what they need to me, I start to visualize the framework of the database and how that would interact. I've picked up a lot of design, so I know how I want things to look. But writing the Java and all the stuff that you need, it's not what I do. But the way that I watch and observe, say, our CTO do things, the writing of the code is going to be less of the skill, and more of the skill is how well as a software developer are you efficient with token usage and tool usage, and how you can use those tools to find your bugs, to do quality code checks on your code, to build things in the plan mode versus in the actual execute mode. Because you're right, the thousands of lines of tiny code and like copying a project ecosystem from before and then building maybe not just from scratch, how that you used to do it. You'd like, oh, this project kind of fits, so I'm going to slap this on, delete a bunch of this stuff and kind of start from here. Or using like plug-in libraries. You don't have to do any of that anymore, So I think the quality, instead, what it used to be quality of code, now it's like, quality of control of your agents, right? And then I think what's going to end up becoming more important is your SOC compliance, is your certifications that you're able to slap on to. Because all we've got to wait is till there's some large-scale fraud and attacks. And not that people aren't used to getting a letter in the mail that says, hey, you've been given 12 months of identity protection because, and that's for companies that did it the right way. What's to happen when someone that has no technical knowledge does this? So that, I think that's going to be a differentiator. And then I think what we kind of focus on, a new term that's kind of come out, is forward deployed engineer. The firms that win are going to be firms that are able to use forward deployed engineers who can best talk to the clients. Because at the end of the day, people are still paying people, and people pay us to build them websites. Not because they can't go to Wix and do it, but because they really want that professional quality product, and then they want all the benefits of SEO and all those things. And for a couple $100 a month, you can have that done to the best it can be done versus sucking your time out that you could be using for your business. We're talking people have been able to build websites since way before AI, but they're still paying people to build websites because it's a finite skill. So people are starting to associate the fact that this can be done by people without the skills, that it's going to become irrelevant. And that's just frankly not true. So websites are infinitely more simple than software, as you know. So to think that just because now we have tools that can do 90% of it, we've had tools that can build websites. I mean, WordPress came out 20 years ago and people were building plugins and drag and drop editors for that. And I was doing that 10, 15 years ago, but
Yeah.
it's not going to be replaced. It's not going to be easy, but our ability to relate to the clients and, unfortunately our pricing power is, going down, but that's good because we've enhanced the size of the total addressable market that we can capture as software firms.
Yeah. What is that? Is it I forget the name. There is a saying, right? There's a paradox for exactly what you said.
I
When
can't
something
think of
becomes
it.
cheaper, the demand does not diminish, but it actually goes up. Somebody
It goes
said that
half
it's
the size
attributed
and
to
half the price and double the power.
oh my God, it doesn't skip
something's
my
law.
mind.
Somebody's law.
Yeah, but because no, if I remember this, I'll share before we end. But it's a paradox or Javon's paradox or one of those things where it's like when the price of something goes down, it's not that the demand's going to reduce because when you unrelated to some of what you said, but to what it's worth, the price of memory is seeming AI memory, it seems to be going down. And some of the companies in that space like Seagate and Micron have taken a beating the last 2 weeks. So two sides of the story is one is, okay, is the need for memory going to be diminished? Maybe, maybe not. More people are going to be able to get more memory because it's becoming more affordable to get this HBM, for instance, right? But that I'm digressing there. But coming back to what you said, some of the things very profound. I want to dig a little bit deeper. The way you looking to staff a team is going to change quite a bit based on what you just said there. When I graduated from college, which was like 100 years ago, Rob, and I was looking for work, the way software engineering worked was very, very different. They're looking to see whether you understood the databases and data structures and storage and all the kind of cool stuff that you typically learn probably in college. And then you're being tested on that, algorithms and how fast you can think and how can you code. Do you have the ability over creating, how good is your syntax with C? My first job was in C programming, so I was tested on C syntax and whatnot. None of that is going to happen today, even when you're hiring a software engineer, which means the bar, the line, the expectations have shifted like tremendously, right? It's not even the same thing anymore. You talked about, are they able to use these tools to solve these real problems? How well can they do it? Are they aware of some of the tools that are available out there? What kind of experience do they have in these tools? So that's a different set of expectations altogether. So before we move on to the next part of our conversation, I just want to wrap this segment with, has software engineering changed to a point where you cannot say that I'm very good at programming, so I need a job?
It is fundamentally changing.
That's not even
and I think
bar
a
of
true
measure
software
anymore.
engineer, not
Can we say that?
myself, is better suited to answer that question. It is fundamentally changing. But, I remember a course in college where, part of the exam, like the final exam, you're on there in Python and it's asking you to retrieve a set of data and you have to come up with the command to do that. You have to understand the language, so it's kind of like, I was actually talking to somebody about this earlier. We've all went to the gym and we've lifted weights, right? We've built real muscle. You've built a lot more than me, but I've got more than guys that are just starting to use, some of these programs. And we're curling. So we're doing curls. I'm curling a 30, you're curling a 60. And some guy comes in with an exoskeleton and he picks up 100. And he's like, I'm strong too. You are, but you don't have the fundamentals behind it. So I know that doesn't answer your question, but it's the best example I have to where everyone's moving weight. Some people did the work and understand kind of what's at the core of it and could fix a catastrophic issue or go through and do quality codes. But I think the makeup of teams is going to change. You're going to have your junior, what we would typically consider a junior dev, where they know some stuff, but because of AI, they can do most of the work. And maybe that's done by just agents. But you're going to have mid-tier junior But then there's always going to be somebody that's that real programmer that you have to have, depending on the size of the organization, that really can understand what's going on, because you can't just put someone in a Formula One car, right? Like, you can't just do that. You would have to have somebody on that team engineer, that really actually drove through all the levels of the Formula One circuit, rather than you just stuck someone in there that now can drive it. I don't know. I think the makeup, I don't think really any of us know, but I know it is fundamentally changing, and it's changing at a pace that most of us are uncomfortable with. And it's scary how fast it's changing.
I think you said that right there, because, I want to take the example of AWS and all the issues they've had in the last 3 weeks or so. A lot of us have seen that in the news. A lot of it was AI generated code. They pushed it to production, and they've had outages not once or twice, more than once actually. And this is in a company that surely understands AI. You're talking AWS, right? Where, they've been building software for 1,000 years, and they have a million customers. So they know what they're doing, yet they got it wrong. And then I think what I read last there, Rob, was they required that all of this code that was generated had to be approved by a human, a senior engineer, before it actually was deployed to these higher environments or something along those lines. And this is coming from AWS, which means that sort of answers some of the questions that I was asking you there as well. And you spoke to it too, which is maybe the need hasn't gone away. The need has continued. It's going to continue to change. I think it's fair to say that. So I think it's a good point to get to some of the other things we want to talk about here. But one last thing I want to ask you related to a number of things we touched upon here is, now we talked about the barriers to entry becoming lower and lower. I mean, if you want to be in medicine, you want to be a doctor, you have to go to college, get those diplomas and get certifications and do your residency, because you're dealing with human lives, right? So the government requires that. You want to be in
Right.
law, sure, you need to pass the bar, some regulations and requirements. But the computer science and software engineering has never had that. I mean, there's no governmental requirement that you need to actually go to college and get a diploma to write code. Never was the case, and it certainly is not the case now. So enough said there. But what that also means, Rob, is the barriers to entry being lowered means somebody who's graduating high school tomorrow, or probably not even graduating, or maybe graduating college, or maybe not even graduating, can easily become a competitor to what Rob is doing and what Krish is doing. So how do you prepare yourself as an individual and as a company to be able to
that
address
is definitely
an
a question
ever-increasing pool of people who can suddenly become a
I think
competition?
that, like with most things, when they start to get overdone, what we will see is there'll be a big blowback. There always is. On an over acceptance of things, companies will and are currently getting burned by people overselling the abilities who really aren't technical or don't have the team behind them, or not being able to deliver something into production. And so I think having, obviously, people with the right credentials on the team and having the examples and former clientele that you can show. And so one of the principles that we do is it's all about showing working code for us. It's iterative development. Every week we do a midweek review, and then every 2 weeks is our end of sprint review. And if we're not showing you something, you fire us. And that's how I tell all the clients. And they love that, but it's the truth. I'm here to deliver working code to you immediately. And I think the scrutiny is going to be coming pretty quickly with, okay, when we start to take on new clients, Chris, it's going to be, well, how are you going to make sure that we don't have data loss, and so we're going to have to integrate some of those more advanced, and Lovable, I think it was Lovable just came up with a thing like for $100 on, you can get pen testing through some agency that would do some penetration testing on your app. And so there's going to be tools where people can claim this and that. It's a good question. I think there will be blowback on the overusage of internal and firms with limited history. So I think it's going to be a fair challenge. A lot of people are going to get burned because that barrier to entry is so low.
Makes sense. What are some of the tools that you folks currently use that you're like, what, this is really cool. It's completely changed our lives, and there's no reason why we don't see ourselves using that in the near future.
Whether it's, Cursor is one that we use quite a bit, which is just, Lovable on steroids, essentially, without the pretty interface. But me and one of the other more non-technical co-founders, we use Lovable all the time. So the fact it keeps getting better as well. So being fluent in AI tools obviously does help you quite a bit. Perplexity just released a tool that's really cool that our CEO found, and it's basically like your in-mail inbox, and it's helping us do cold lead outreach. And so one of the things is in Waffl OS, the way we set up Waffl OS, which is our software product, is there's a suite of agents that can do actions for you, and it's really aimed at the small business that they want to cut through the fluff, and they don't want to have complexities with AI. It's, hey, this is Alex, he does sales for you. Here's the tools he can integrate with, and here's a bunch of prompts to help you get started. Hey, look at my sales for the last 3 months. What do you think I should do in order to boost sales for X product, Y product? It's very straightforward. Well, one of the things we were looking at is going, okay, this Perplexity, maybe we want to integrate because what Perplexity does is it sets up a virtual machine, and then we'll create a specific agent, but there's not a lot of interconnected. There's really none amongst the agents. Do we want to give that skill, if you will, to our agents in Waffl OS so they can use that tool? Because Perplexity, what it has built is a little more efficient on token usage and a little better than just having an agent go into your Gmail API, draft a message after it finds that person on LinkedIn, is what you currently can do on Waffl OS. But we might have found a better way. So that's just an example of it's changing all so fast, Krish, that, we're currently just trying to keep up and make our agents on Waffl OS better to do certain skills and actions for the user. I think everyone should be worried about it.
Do you worry about AI slop?
Because there's a lot of it.
And if so, how do you deal with that?
It's funny is that one of the things that you'll see out there is using different tools to audit different tools. You could say, get a code base written by something, take that code base, and then have another AI or AIs evaluate it. And it does a really good job at finding other inefficiencies and slop. So there's internal audits that you can do, but I think it's what we talked about earlier, building the right team and having the right audit process and knowing about how your process delivers code, because we don't want to overbuild and we don't want to over deliver things. And that's where people will start to get burned, and that's where that blowback from software is so easy to build, I think will.
Okay. We've kind of established that the way you hire a software engineer has changed quite a bit. I gave you an example of how I was hired, for instance, in my first job, and it's going to be nowhere near that when you hire somebody today. I think we can also say that the languages have become less important. I mean, we are a polyglot shop at Snowpal, but regardless, I know companies that rely on one language because they don't see a need for another. But regardless, whether you have one language or 10 languages, maybe it's become less important now because a lot of time a code is being generated, or you could also have code written in one language or generated in one and converted to the other. Similarly, the code quality is also probably, we are all taught to write great code or good code or clean code. Now I wonder why we should do any of that, because you could write sloppy code, terrible code, and have AI tools fix it for you so the code gets better. So you don't even have to write great code. So I don't need to know programming as much if I need to know it at all. I don't need to know certain languages. I don't need to know how to write better code. So a lot of the core tenets of what made a software engineer is slowly but surely disappearing, which means they've got to be replaced with some other skills, right? If you don't need these skills, you probably need some other skills. Outside of knowing some of the AI tools and technologies out there, outside of, being AI aware, outside of being a good problem solver,
unfortunately it might make the hairs
what
on
are
some
other
developers
skills that you can think of, Rob, that you think is going to make that
they don't like
candidate stand out from some others?
But the best developers, I think, going forward are going to eliminate the role that I used to be in, which is a product owner. So the more you can play, I'm a dev, but I also understand business and can talk to the client and make that person. If we had a person that could combine with our CTO and me and replace us both, that's the most valuable person. So being able to have those soft skills and being able to understand more than just code and the things that make nerds, right? Like we're nerds. Like those things typically make us less sociable, but having those social soft skills and being able to communicate to the person you're building this for, that is going to be the most desirable trait, because that's something AI cannot do. You can prompt AI to build what you want, but the context is always going to be so lost. I remember early on in AI, and it was like, someone was like, generate an image of a salmon jumping in the water. And it was like salmon from like the grocery store. And it's just like, it's gotten way better than that, but it's always that context. And so given that you're saying like a lot of those skills of like really needing to know how to do a call or write some type of, because a lot of these guys writing code, they don't even know what the right symbol is going to be to add a comment into the code. They don't know the language that they're using. They have no idea. They never did the thing where you start with a code and you got it to say, hello world. Hello world. That's the first thing you learn when you're starting a new language, right? And so people just don't have that at all. But if you have someone in the team or an external party that can be that senior engineer and do your reviews, but also if you have the person that's doing the work able to communicate with the client, I really think that's the most desirable skill set.
I could not agree more with you, because I've said that many a times on the podcast here, that the roles of, the lines of separation are becoming grayer on a daily basis. There's no clear separation anymore between a developer, an architect, a product manager, a tester, and a sales engineer. If you're a smaller organization, we always wore a number of different hats. I mean, that's a given. I mean, in large companies, had dedicated roles, but small companies almost never. But even in larger organizations, I think you're coming to a moment of reckoning here where you're not going to hire somebody to do just one thing. Maybe you have one thing that they'll do most of the time, but that's certainly not the one thing that they're going to do all of the time. So being able to I think the importance of becoming a jack of all trades, yet being a master of some of them to some degree, to whatever extent that is, I think becomes extremely important, right? So no, I think you summarized that very well there. So we've talked about a number of different things: AI, tools, skill sets, the changing dynamics, and all of those types of things. Maybe the last couple of things I want to ask you is the dependencies that you do have, right? You mentioned Lovable a couple of times. There's always options. You mentioned Cursor, you mentioned tools. Let's talk deployment or, cloud computing just for a little bit, because for the longest of times, you had like three big players: AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure. Sure, AWS is number one. I think Azure is probably two, and cloud is three. But from a growth standpoint, I think Google Cloud is doing a lot better. Amazon's got a large market share already, so their growth numbers are not anywhere near. Microsoft was making an impact, but then suddenly what happened was Copilot, which they put a lot of money into. I think they have like 15 million users, which is like 3 to 4% of their entire user base. When you talk about Microsoft as a software company and them selling seats and whatnot. So it's not been going so well for Microsoft. It is what it sounds like from a Copilot standpoint. But that, and also from a cloud computing standpoint, are you guys using one of these three providers? Do you pick one of the three, or do you go with one of the other neo clouds like Nebius or CoreWeave, or one of those other companies that are coming into existence and they're doing quite well
we
these
do
days? Like
ask the clients what they prefer.
Do your dependencies lie as a software company?
Most of the time they don't have an opinion. They just kind of go with our recommendation. But I like to use the example I don't know how many times we've tried to get on Lovable, which is, I want to say they're a several billion-dollar company. I don't remember the multiple. I haven't looked at it. They've received a ton of investment. I mean, they go down all the time, it seems like. And so I think the most prudent risk is to establish yourself, to be flexible, to move, because the giants may become obsolete, right? We hate to think that way. You think they're too big to fail, but, technology and history show that companies fail and they don't last more than 100.
And they are, right? So Rob, just to chime in there, I think if you looked at just the market cap of these companies, Microsoft's probably lost like 35% of their market cap in the last like 4 months. Meta, what is it? They've lost like 35% as
Right.
well. And all of the hyperscalers have lost their market valuation in a market, their net worth has dropped by over 20%. I mean, we're talking, Alphabet, we're talking Amazon, we're talking other ones there. Tesla has dropped like 25%. So they've lost a lot of value, plenty of value. So I think it's not even a question that, they're not too big to fail maybe as a company in entirety, but each of their products and divisions and segments is certainly not immune to failure. We've seen that. I called out for, Metaverse and Meta losing $80 billion on Reality Labs, Apple making wrong decisions there, not spending enough money on AI. Maybe that turned out to be their best decision, probably. I don't know. Maybe they are in
Right.
better shape because they did not spend
We're
much
using
money
some
on
of the more
AI.
modern tools.
But yeah, sorry, I
like
don't want to interrupt you there, but I was just going to
Vercel
say
and
that
Supabase,
none of these are too
smaller,
big to fail.
a lot cheaper for the clients, way cheaper for the clients, and easier to move off of and decommit if they don't turn out to work, rather than the traditional kind of bulgy packages, if you will, that you have to commit to, that are several $100s a month. So yeah, and most of our people, you don't have to have insane amounts of computing power, and you just want reliability, because most of these apps are not going to be under the stress that you think they are. So we're using some of the newer tools to deploy to, just for kind of speed of deployment and flexibility, so that we can move off of them and save our clients money.
The last two things, one is about food, but I'm going to come back. That's my last question. How excited are you, or how anxious are you? How nervous are you, if you're at all, about all of these things changing? As humans, we're not always excited about change. Sometimes we are, sometimes not. Different people react to change differently. So we need some stability. We don't want too many things changing all the time, but we don't
if you
have the
look back
luxury
to the
of
first
dictating
part of the
terms, surely.
podcast where
So
I
what
gave
is your
that
state of
great
mind
life
when it
coaching
comes to
advice,
these things that are changing so rapidly?
that you enjoyed. I wouldn't say it was great myself, but I think that there is a lot of change, and there's a lot of FOMO, and there's a lot of, you really feel like you're missing out. But what that has created and will continue to create is a lot of opportunity. And that's the biggest thing that I'm seeing. Because anytime a new, like we were talking about earlier, anytime something new is generated and something has become irrelevant, there's all kinds of new intricacies to fill in on and capitalize and create a business on. And part of that business, the key kind of theory and thesis that we have is AI, although it makes things a lot more simple, it's incredibly complex. And our thesis is, we're going to be smarter at it than you, and you're going to want us to implement it in your business, period. So I think people that can do that, and there's all kinds of niches for that, I think they're going to be successful. So honestly, I'm looking at it and I'm hungry about it. So I know you said you're going to talk about food, but I see opportunity and I see money-making potential. And that's the way I'm choosing to look at it.
I think I think no better. I don't know if there's other better ways to look at it. So I think it's a great way to look at it. You are located in Nashville, correct, in Tennessee. So for what it's worth, why is Rob not relocating to San Francisco, to Foster City, to Palo Alto to do this cool next set of things? Why do you think you can do that? I ask this question as somebody who loves the business, been doing it, but don't live there either. I live in the suburbs of DC.
Mama's happy.
Why do you think? So, why are you in Nashville and not in San Francisco?
We moved 7 times in the military, and so I got out and I told her we will live where you want to. And we're originally from Tennessee, and so we decided to kind of stay put where our last duty station was, here in Middle Tennessee, and we like it. We like our friends, we like our church, we like our city, so we're just going to stay put. And I think that's 99% of it. I know there's a lot to being in person, and there's a lot to being out there on the hustle and the grind, but that's kind of the easy answer for me. And there's a lot of tools that, honestly, it kind of goes to build it and they will come. It's not necessarily being there that's going to make you successful, but if you have a good product, like VCs are going to reach out to you, firms are going to find you. people are not adverse to hiring people over the internet anymore.
Very nice, right? I think I
Yeah,
love to
so
hear
I
that
guess one
answer.
thing that I
Okay, so I
would
have one last food question, but again,
like
this is
to
your
ask
last
you
opportunity to
is in
ask me
terms
anything that
of
you may want to ask.
dealing with clients, what do you guys find the frequency of human interaction needs to be and is to kind of appropriately manage clients? Because we have a challenge with that because, right, an agency can't scale if it's held down on fixed variables, which is how much, human input we have to have. But at the same time, you've got to find a happy medium to make sure your clients feel taken care of. So that's something we've been struggling with because your clients want to talk to you every day. You couldn't get their work done if you talk to them every day.
Very, very nice question. So let me make sure I understood it correctly, Rob. So your question is, how do you give the time that each of your clients might actually need from you as a company, from the human side of your company,
Yeah, I mean, they
given
want
the
to know where
fact
the
that a lot of the
progress is
systems
at, and
are
it's like,
going to
well,
become
just log
automated
in and
and you have
look,
other
you can
fish to
see,
fry? Would
but
that be
at
the
the same
crux of the
time,
question?
we want to limit planning to the time that we have dedicated to planning, not outside time. So it just,
No, I think, yeah, I think it's a very interesting question because, each client is going to have different needs because of the problems that they are trying to solve, right? Sure enough. And also depending on, there are cultural differences as well, right? I mean, I come from India where every state speaks a different language. The food is different. When I moved to the US, I thought, okay, culturally, when I drove hundreds of miles or flew, I did not appreciate the differences at the time because they were very subtle to me. But after having lived here most of my life now, it's not just as subtle anymore. There are some remarkable differences. Maybe not necessarily when it comes to languages and food, possibly. I mean, they are different, but not as much as I've seen back home in India. But it is different. So the reason I mentioned that is when I talk to somebody on the phone, it takes me all of 5 minutes or lesser, Rob, to tell whether they're calling me from somewhere in Texas, where I went to school, the southern part of the US, whether it's New York, upstate New York, or Boston, or the West Coast. I mean, it does not matter. It could be any conversation, engineering or otherwise. I can tell where that call is coming from. And that is a starting point already because the conversation's got to be different, right? There are cultural differences. I can tell you how I used to work at Oracle a long time ago, one of my first jobs there. And I was told when I was working there, it's very informal in terms of how you expressed your disagreements. So someone could come and say, Krish, what the query that you wrote is like terrible. It's garbage. Write something else. I thought that okay, that's how everybody spoke, right? So when I moved on from Oracle to smaller companies that are located here and elsewhere, I carried that language with me. And as you can imagine, that did not necessarily sit well. People are like, what the heck are you talking about? And then I realized that, you know what? Every place is different. Every company is different. Every person is different. So you're going to have to make these adjustments. And that's the intangible, the subjective part of what we all have to do as a company, as an individual. And you said that better than I could say, which is engineers cannot just be engineers anymore. They need to have sales abilities and have the ability to talk to people. So I think that's the starting point. Every client is going to be different. So if you have a pipeline and you have an automated process where you send every client through, I'm not convinced that they are going to necessarily be happy because when I've worked with other companies, I'm recording this on a certain platform, right? And we've had some issues with this platform and I don't get to a human quick enough to solving these problems. And I have this chatbot, it asks me these stupid 20 questions because it thinks it's smart
yeah.
because it's trying to automate this. It's only making life easier for the company to know what issues I'm running into, maybe, Rob. But as an end user, it does not help me. It's frustrating. I say, I now say, get me a human like 10 times. I paste it 10 times. And then eventually I get to a human and I'm looking to get to that human. So I think for each of the clients, for the type of problems you're solving, maybe some problems are better solved with two humans in a conversation. Maybe there are other problems that are better solved with two agents having that conversation. So I think it's you have to be willing to make that separation. People want to productize everything possible because it's cheaper for them to do it, but it just does not work. You're going to have to have custom solutions and approaches to work with different people and companies. I don't know if this answer is making sense, but if it does to some extent, I'll give you a completely irrelevant way of supplementing this answer. India as a country makes a lot of movies, right? I mean, they make more movies than Hollywood, I think, collectively speaking, because there's like a lot of different languages. Now, what's happened in the last few years, they're spending a lot more money in making movies and cinema, but they've tried to productize the cinema, meaning they want to make movie for one part of the country in one language, but they want to dub the movie in like 7 different languages using AI or humans or whatnot, and sell it in 10 different parts of the country. And I cannot tell you how many times it falls flat because culturally, the story and the cinema does not make sense for another part of the country. So, what are you going to sell in Texas? You probably don't want to sell in New York City. You're going to have to sell it differently, right? So, you're going to have to accept that there are differences culturally and maybe even technologically and come up with this process that's works for you as a company that also respects the separation that the client actually truly
want the widget
deserves.
to be the same.
I know that's
for
a
every
super
widget
generic
that comes
answer,
because it's easier
but I don't know.
for
That's
us.
the best I'm able to
You're
come
right.
up with here.
You do, especially with high ticket, you have to probably go at the client's own pace. And so it's probably something I'm going to take back to the team. And as we are always tinkering with our Waffl portal, which is where our clients live in, having some flexibility. And part of the reason we built Waffl OS was to help us automate a lot of things. We have unlimited flexibility there to change the automation for a particular client, whether it's follow-up, scheduling meetings. So I think that's a good, I love the point. I love the point you made.
Thank you. So the thing I want to ask you before I let you have the closing comment is, you're going out for dinner. You could go wherever you want to go. Money is no object. It doesn't have to be. I want you to tell me what your order would be for an entree, appetizer, and a dessert. But let's keep it as it doesn't have to be part of the same cuisine.
I'm a relatively simple man.
Each cuisine if you want to.
Appetizer, I would have to go with some form of sushi because I love sushi, and probably something high end, some type of shrimp tempura, but also with something on top. So the double meat. But you get the double fish. Let's start with that. For an entree, although when I'm telling you what my favorite things are from each, I don't know that I would actually eat these all in this order. Probably not. But man, I love Italian food. So I would go with something from I would get jetted somewhere to go to an authentic Italian restaurant and eat some great pasta. There. Something with probably some chicken and some kind of creamy sauce. And then for dessert, nothing can beat ice cream to me. So ice cream, you can keep it simple. I love Cold Stone ice cream because they mix it there. They mix it right in front of you on the marble slab. So something like that. That would be my answer. I'm pretty easy to please.
I was looking for something more exotic in Nashville. You go with Cold Stone Creamery. That's all right,
stuff
Rob.
goes out the window. You're just happy to, get to eat, I have never been to Britain, but I was stationed in Germany.
Have you
for a
been
number
to
of years, so we've traveled a lot around Europe. So
up to the United Kingdom. Oh, okay, cool. The only reason I say that is you mentioned ice cream, and we were visiting a few years ago. I love England. So we were there in York, I think, and we stumbled into this tiny little place, mom and pop ice cream shop. Very, very small. And then the portion sizes surely are nowhere near what you get in the US, right? Our portion sizes, nobody understands it. So we got this ice cream and it was tiny. And we were like, is there more? We go, no, that is it. That's how much you get. And we were like, okay, this is not even the smallest one that you get at the Cold Stone, for instance. But
it's
it was
funny
incredible.
Because England is not
I don't know, maybe it's the cows in England
cuisine,
or the richness of that milk and what. It was just amazing. Well, I have to say that if you are there, you should try the Indian food in England. It's just remarkable. If you're not in India or if you're not in Singapore, the third best place to try Indian
I could change the dessert. I could go to New York City, Serendipity, and they have this frozen hot chocolate that's really amazing there. But you can only get it really there, and it's unlike anything else. So it's pretty good.
Amazing. It makes me hungry already. Lovely, right? I'm going to let you have the closing comment, but I'm just going to give one more introduction. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with Rob Wright, who's a West Point graduate, a former special operations leader and a tech founder who's currently, running Waffl. We'll include the link gowaffl.com and the link to Rob's LinkedIn profile.
Closing
on the
comment
podcast.
would just
So
be,
certainly
I
do
think
check
what
out the
we
company
kind of
and
hit on
reach
here
out
is
Rob.
to really evaluate
That said, Rob,
what you're implementing into
closing
your
comment,
business
please.
or what tools you're building as a software firm. Do you need that? Does that replace something or generate something of value? Does it save you money or generate you new money? Because if it doesn't, you need to reevaluate what you're doing. And sometimes the core issue is not necessarily a new tool. It's that you never had a process to begin with. And so maybe you need to build the process and then choose what you stack on top of it. And it may not be AI. It could be a regular SaaS platform that you need, or pen and paper, or Google Sheets. So that would be my closing comment, is really evaluate what you're doing, because AI doesn't fix what's already broken.
Thank you very much, Rob. Stay on the call for a minute or two, but folks, until next time, bye-bye.